Miss to your classes that away. And Miss Tammy will be there waiting on you. She's headed that way herself. 5th and 6th grade, you're that away. 7th and 12th, or 7th, 8th, I'm not real sure on the students. I get lost on the student ministry. Our children's ministry are doing, and they're already dismissed in Spring Hill, so I know you guys just give us a little time to do this in Columbia, but our children's ministry is doing Advent with us. And so make sure and talk to them, ask them questions about it when they get back from their classes. But I hope that you're finding this participation in Advent meaningful to you. I hope it's adding some purpose and meaning into the celebration of Christmas and making it a little bit more than what it typically is this time of year. It's kind of typically about consumerism and kind of having the perfect family Christmas and for all perfect gifts and all those kinds of things. But we're looking back to the real purpose and meaning behind Christmas, and I hope that Advent's helping you to do that. We've been doing something called the Advent Conspiracy. If you're just joining us for the first time today, we've been following a book that talks about 4 themes connected, not the same 4 themes of the Advent candles, although we've connected them just a little bit, but we've been talking about worship fully, spend less, give more, and love all. And today we're talking give more. My small group participated in the small group study on the first Sunday of Advent. So December 1st, our group met, and we did the whole study at once because we knew December's a busy month, and we're probably not going to have time to get together the rest of the month, and we didn't. And so we said, let's just do the whole study at one time. So we took questions about each theme and asked those questions. And when we got to giving, the question was, what is the most meaningful gift you ever received, and why? And I want to invite you to think through that with me this morning. So if you think through from the very first Christmas you remember, whether you were 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, the very first Christmas you remember, all the way to the present, of all the gifts you've received, and it's hundreds of gifts. There's no way you could remember all of them. We can't even remember what we got last year. Right? But you think through all the gifts you've received, which one was the most meaningful to you? And why was it the most meaningful? Why did it make a lasting impression on you? And so as we started answering that question, I thought, well, that's going to take a little while. To think back through all the Christmases, I mean, that's like a lot of Christmas. For some of you, that's a lot of Christmases, right? I mean, that's going to take a while. How are we going to pick out the one out of that? What I was surprised by was it was so easy. Like, just about everybody in our group just had an immediate answer. Like, it was an Atari system I got when I was 8 years old, or it was the Cabbage Patch doll. You remember when that was the hot, it was the Apple IIe computer that my dad got me, the 3.5-inch floppy disk, Oregon Trail preloaded on it. We just knew immediately what it was. For me, I was like, it was a 243 Winchester. My dad got it for me when I was 16 years old, and we went out and shot it that Christmas morning, and I was on a round hay bale out by the barn, and I remember that, and I've still got that gun. I shot my first buck with that gun. My daughter's 16 years old. She shot one with it last weekend. It's beat up and banged up and bruised up, but I'll never get rid of it. I'll never get rid of it. Why? Is it worth a lot of money? I don't know how much it's worth. It doesn't matter to me how much it's worth. My dad gave it to me, and it means something to me, and I'm going to give it to my son, and I hope, he passes it down to his son. I mean, it's just that I just knew immediately what it was. Now, in all fairness, I didn't really have time to think about it because that was just a question in the moment. And after having a week to think about it, I started realizing that there was another gift that perhaps had more meaning to me than the gun. And I guess I didn't think about it because it wasn't a Christmas present. It was a Father's Day present. And this one, I'll tell you the story behind it. I don't remember exactly when it was. So it was 8 to 10 years ago. I know Lily, who's now 20, was probably around 9 or 10 years old. I'm guessing. I don't know. She's played softball since she was 4. So it could be anywhere in that range of time. But it was a Father's Day, and for whatever reason, I didn't get a gift on that Father's Day. And that's not strange and unusual because we don't make a huge deal out of Father's Day. Like, we don't have a dinner and all that stuff. I mean, we just don't make a huge deal out of it. But that particular year, I didn't get a gift, and somehow I made that known. like that hurt my feelings a little bit, that my kids didn't get me anything for Father's Day. And so somehow I had kind of let that slip a little bit, I was pouting a little bit probably around the house. And so Lily went out in the garage and got in our ball bucket, and she pulled out this softball, and she took it up to her room, and she decorated it. And it's got, a big heart on one side, and then it's got bunch of little bitty softballs on this side, and it's got a big softball right there. And she wrote a note that said, "Dear Dad, thanks for being a great softball coach and a great dad. Love, Lily Adcox." And she put her last name in case I didn't know which Lily had given it to me. That's the most meaningful gift I've ever received. That softball. And you say, well, why? Is it worth a lot of money? No. Matter of fact, I already owned it. She gave me something I already owned. Right? It's not worth, it's worth maybe $1 or something, but you couldn't offer me enough money for this softball. It stayed in her softball bag all through her, softball career. And so I actually had to go dig it out of her bag, which was in our garage for this message. I went and dug it out of the bag, and it's probably going to live on my shelf with all the softball pictures that I've got on the shelf. And you say, well, why is that a meaningful gift? Because it's not worth much. It's an old practice softball. It's beat up, and her drawings are not even that pretty on it. Why is that worth a lot? Well, I don't even have to answer that question for you, do I? You know why it's worth a lot. Because it's not about the gift. It's about the giver. It's not about how much it was worth. It's about, how much it's worth in material means. It's about how much it's worth to me. It's worth something to me because it was a relational gift. It was a gift from somebody that I care deeply about. That .243 Winchester was worth something to me, not because, it's a gun and it's got value. It's because my dad gave it to me. It was a relational gift, and that's why it meant something to me. It's not the size of the gift that matters. It's the heart of the giver that matters. Now, Jesus tells a story about that. Well, actually, Jesus doesn't tell the story. It's a story that's told about Jesus. Mark tells it, and Luke tells the same story about a time that Jesus was sitting outside of the temple, and that people were coming and presenting their offerings. And apparently at that time, they didn't pass buckets or plates or anything like that, but there was a central place that people came to give their offerings. And you could actually see not only who was coming to give an offering, but apparently you could see how much they were giving. Because Jesus, as he was watching these people come and give their offerings, he could see that there were wealthy people coming, and they were giving large amounts of money into the temple treasury. And there was a woman, a widow, who came in and gave 2 small copper coins. And they were worth pennies. And Jesus called his disciples over, and he pointed this woman out, and he said, I want you to look at this woman. She has given more to the temple of treasury than all of these, because they gave out of their wealth or their excess, but she gave out of her poverty. She put in all she had to live on. And in essence, what Jesus was saying is, it's not about the gift or the size of the gift. It's about the giver. It's about the heart of the giver. And I wanted to start there because we're talking about give more today. And if you're like me, when you see a message like this, you immediately think 2 things. 1, money, and 2, I don't give enough of it. That's kind of the things that we think of. When you see a message like we're going to talk about giving more, that's going to be a tough message to hear, because anytime I talk about giving or generosity, people feel guilty because they don't give as much as they should, or don't give as much as they can or able, or that. And it's usually not because they don't want to give. It's usually because I want to give, I just don't have the capacity. I don't have the means. I rarely meet a Scrooge that's just like, I don't want to give to any of those needs. We want to give. The desire is there. It's the means that aren't there. And it's why I think Advent Conspiracy was wise in the way they put this study together, that it kind of goes in order here. You can't give more unless you first learn to spend less. And you can't spend less unless you first learn to get your priorities in order. So we start with worship fully. And worship fully is, seek first the kingdom of God. We start with God, and we start with getting our priorities right, and then we do the hard part. We try to get our spending in line with our priorities, which gives us the capacity to give more. And so that's a part of it. Like when you see that thing, give more, part of it is giving more materially. And that not just at this time of year, but just throughout the year. That's the reason that God has given us the wealth that we have. This is in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11. It's one of the most challenging passages of Scripture. Paul, as he's talking about an offering, a collection for the church, he tells the Corinthians, which undoubtedly had some wealthy people in that congregation. It's a port city. There's a lot of commerce going on in that city. He says, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. Now, what Paul tells you there is the purpose of wealth. The purpose of wealth is not just so, you've got security for retirement, or it's not so you can get more possessions or buy stuff you want, although you can do those things with wealth, and that's good. The purpose of wealth is so you can be generous on every occasion. The purpose of wealth, according to God's economy, is generosity. And when you practice generosity, it results in thanksgiving to God. I want you to think about stories that you've seen, and this is a time of year where we see a lot of these stories. Think about stories you've seen of people that were generous with their money and how inspiring that is to us. Like when there was a story I saw recently about a CEO that gave a huge bonus to his employees. I think it was 100 and something employees in there. The biggest check was like $50,000. You imagine going to a Christmas party and getting $50,000? People were just weeping. And I'm weeping watching it because that inspires me. That video we watched last week, everybody got choked up in the video last week. Why? Because a kid gave his mom a coffee pot? Were we choked up over the coffee pot? Or one of them gave his mom a big screen TV? Were we choked up over the big screen TV? No, it wasn't about the gift. It was about the giver. It was the fact that it was a relational gift, that these kids had given up something in order to give something to somebody else. And I want us to think about, when we think of give more, we think just a little bit more broadly than just a check. Yeah, that's a part of it. Writing a check is a part of giving. But that's not usually what our family needs most. I mean, Lily could have gone out and written me a check. Hey, Dad, sorry we forgot. Here you go. She knew how to forge our name at 9, 10 years old. So, she could have wrote me a check and given me a check, and I wouldn't be talking about that. I wouldn't put her check up on my shelf in the office and say, that right there is the most meaningful thing to me that I've ever received. You see, that it's because what she gave was not just money. She gave me something of great value that's worth very little money. What she gave me was her time, her presence, her relationship. That's what she gave me. Now, I don't know how these messages come together, and how God kind of directs these things as I prep for these messages, but I'm telling you, I was thinking originally about give more is about giving more money, and I thought, well, I'm going to go find another video, because last week's video, that worked really well, so I'll go find another video and see if I can find an inspiring story about somebody giving money to somebody else. And the first one I popped up was 4 inspiring stories of giving, and I was like, oh, here's a good one right here. And it was the story of David Deutschman, and it was an inspiring story of generosity. But he doesn't give a penny. And I want to show you. It's just 2 minutes. I don't think you'll need the Kleenex for this one, okay? If it's just 2 minutes, I want you to notice what David Deutschman gives. This is generosity right here. He gave his presence. He gave himself. That's what he gave. He gave those children the gift of time, or the gift of a relationship. And, he could have wrote them a check, and I'm sure they could have used it. But what he gave to them was much more meaningful than just a check. And if you think about what your family needs, we're 10 days away from Christmas. And so we think about practicing Advent and doing Christmas a little differently than normal. What we need more than the exchange of money in the form of gifts, what we need is just the gift of each other's presence, the gift of time, the gift of clearing the schedule just a little bit so that we can be together, the gift of putting the phone down or turning the TV off, the gift of just being present with one another. We need the gift of ourselves. If you want to give more this Advent season, then practice giving more of yourself to those you love. And if you think about it from a broad perspective, that's Christmas. Because that's what we celebrate at Christmas. That's what God did for us. What God did for us is gave us himself. I want to read you a Christmas passage that I've never thought of as a Christmas passage until this year. We always read Luke 2, we always read Matthew 1, Matthew 2, all those kind of things. We read those passages because they're about Christmas. But Scott, at the very first Sunday of Advent, used this passage. And I never connected it to Christmas, although it's so obvious at the front. It's what Christmas is all about. It's what the incarnation is all about, and it's about bringing light into the darkness and bringing hope to the shadows. It's the first chapter of John, and it'll be on the screen, and I may not read it exactly as it is on the screen, because what I did was I went in and I put the word Jesus. So John actually says in the NIV, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We're familiar with that translation. The Word is referring to Jesus, so I just went ahead and put his name in place of the Word. And then a lot of different places John uses just pronouns to refer to him, and I just went ahead and used his name there. And I only got one verse per screen because every single one of them is packed with so much meaning. And so I just want to read through this together, because this is what it means to give more. And we follow the ultimate example, and it's what God himself gave. John says it this way. In the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. Jesus was with God in the beginning. Through Jesus, all things were made that has been made. In him, in Jesus, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John, referring to John the Baptist. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He only came as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. Jesus was in the world. And though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. Jesus came into that which was his own, but it did not receive him. Yet to all who did believe in him, to those who believed in his name, Jesus gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor of a husband's will, but born of God. Jesus became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out and said, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.'" Out of his fullness, the fullness of Jesus, we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, and grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Now listen to verse 18, because here's how he wraps it up. And this is the meaning of the incarnation. This is why God did it. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. So what God did through the incarnation was give us the gift of himself, so that he could make himself known to us, and so that we could become children of his. That's what we celebrate on Christmas. That's why we have joy even in the midst of suffering. It's why we have peace even in the midst of stress and trials. It's why we have hope even in the midst of darkness. Let's pray together.